Yo, what's up, everybody? The Sports Court is live here on a Tuesday. Gregory Beatty, my co-host. I'm Eddie Cox, and we're live from Houston, Texas. And we're fired up to be here with you today. We got a lot on deck. We got to talk the NBA playoffs, man. I mean, the conference finals are in full swing. I think Trae Young is putting the entire NBA on notice, but we can get to that later.
Right.
You know, we're going to talk Astros. We've got the NFL talk as usual. But first, the Los Angeles Clippers are not dead yet. And they proved that last night. Greg, tell me what you saw. Tell me how you're feeling about this Clippers team and with the magnificent Reggie Jackson and
Reggie Jackson hit a home run, didn't he?
Yeah, right. and company and all these, these second tier guys that are showing up. Do they have a chance to come back and steal this series?
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, first of all, Eddie, I want to tell you to make sure you have fun on the 4th of July weekend coming up. I know you're going to eat a lot of barbecue like me. Or should I say barbecue, because you're going to smell that smoke coming from down the street. So look forward to that. Everybody have fun on the 4th. Have a lot of fun.
Hey, we're getting out of town, man. We're going to go do some fishing. Got a beach house in Rockport.
You know what? But you know what, man? What's a trip? Have fun with that.
Oh, for sure.
I'm actually going to a funeral. My cousin passed
no, I'm sorry
a few days ago. I appreciate those condolences, but actually going to a funeral, that will be Saturday. So he's in a better place right now. Definitely going to have some fun on the 4th and do it how we do it. But as far as the Los Angeles Clippers, my friend, this is why when the playoffs first started, now granted, the Clippers are down 3-2 right now to a very, very good Phoenix team, well-coached Phoenix team. Chris Paul obviously going for his first NBA championship, as is Paul George. Now, of course, this is without Kawhi Leonard, but you said something interesting right there, Eddie, when you opened the show about the others on that team that are stepping up, a la Reggie Jackson. I mean, if you think about the Clippers, Paul George had 41 last night, 13 rebounds, 6 assists. So they stave off elimination. And this is the third time in the postseason by winning that game 116-102 over the Suns in Phoenix. Tomorrow night's game will be in L.A., but that's the third time they've staved off elimination in these playoffs. That shows you their grit, their toughness to go along with their talent and their athleticism. And this is why when the playoffs first started, well, not when the playoffs first started, actually after the Lakers were ousted, this is why I said, and I don't think I went as to I don't think I went as far as to say that the Clippers would win it all, but I said that they should win it all if they're clicking on all cylinders because the overall talent on that team. And I still think that's the case until proven otherwise. Now, Phoenix obviously has the upper hand, and they've been playing tremendously. So I don't want to discredit what Phoenix has been able to do thus far and the way they're looking, because before last night, most people, including myself, were starting to believe that they were probably going to win that series and had a great chance of winning the NBA championship. But what Paul George has been able to do, now this guy has scored at least 20 points in all 18 of these playoff games. Kudos to him, Paul George, who a lot of people have criticized in the past about him not being able to deliver in the playoffs, even though he's had some great playoff moments. If you go all the way back to Indiana, Paul George has been no slouch. But what you're seeing, I'm very impressed to the aforementioned Reggie Jackson. Reggie Jackson has, again, he's been hitting home runs, pun intended, in reference to the great Hall of Fame baseball player Reggie Jackson. But Reggie Jackson for the Los Angeles Clippers has been playing tremendously at that point guard position. And I just think, I always thought ever since the Lakers were ousted that with their overall talent, if they're clicking on all cylinders, now granted, me thinking Kawhi was going to be in the mix. And one thing real quick, Kawhi Leonard, folks, he is not coming back from this. In my opinion, what it is a partially torn ACL. Now, of course, I'm not a doctor. I hadn't seen the imaging. But the way that knee buckled, Eddie, and of course they're saying it's a sprain, but the way that knee buckled, I had the same thing happen to me when I was in college at Ohio State playing football in football practice one day. And I came back 2 or 3 weeks later, ultimately tore it all the way through. And that's happened a number of times. But I'm guaranteeing you right now, well, I'm not guaranteeing you, but I would hope Paul
come
George.
on. Don't take away the guarantee.
Well,
man, we're all here for the guarantee. That's what we want to give us the gosh darn guarantee, man.
Well, I'm usually one to give a guarantee, but what I'm saying is,
I'm saying if he comes back.
I'm saying if he comes back, and I don't think he's coming back. Okay, here's what I'm gonna guarantee: that he's not coming back.
There you go.
But what I was gonna say though, but that's not what I was gonna say. I was gonna say I'm guaranteeing you if he comes back and plays on that leg, he's gonna tear it. So I didn't want to go there. I didn't want to go there. But that's a partially torn ACL right there, and he does not want to come back on that ACL. He's probably gonna have at the end of the day. He may end up having to have reconstructive surgery on that knee, whether he comes back or not. So if it's just a sprain, if it's a medial collateral sprain, but the way that knee buckled, that looked like a partially torn ACL. And some people go ahead and get that ligament repaired, even if it's partially torn, depending on how much is partially torn. But I hope for Kawhi Leonard's sake that that's not the case. Again, I'm not a doctor, so I don't know if that partially torn ACL will eventually heal over the summer, but Paul George is not coming back in these playoffs, and if he does, that's a very risky move. But, Eddie, to your question about these others that have stepped up, you look at Marcus Morris last night, you look at Reggie Jackson, and to go along with Paul George, those guys combined, well, your boy Paul George he's the first Clipper ever with 40, 10, and 5 in the playoff performance. That's number one. Again, I mentioned the 20 points in all 18 games. DeMarcus Cousins. We had a Boogie Cousins sighting. And him, Paul George, and Reggie Jackson combined for, I don't think this is right because I put 60 points and 10 rebounds, but well, DeMarcus Cousins had 10 points. Okay, so that's what it is. Reggie Jackson had, I think, like 22 or something like that. But DeMarcus Cousins gave them a quick burst off the bench in that first half, and he really got them rolling, and he really established them in that first half, and I like what they were able to do. Now, Devin Booker, of course, led the Suns with 31, 4, 3 rebounds. Chris Paul, 22 and 8, but the others for the Clippers to go along with that athleticism and that defensive intensity and their grit and will to win, not to mention who I'm going to talk about in a second, Tyronn Lue, who's doing a tremendous job again. He's able to keep his team afloat, keeping them from getting ousted out of the playoffs. Let's see if he can get another one tomorrow and continue with these exploits.
Let's not eat the whole sandwich in one bite because you're stealing my thunder here.
You know I'm loving it.
You're trying to eat it all in one bite.
Let's go, man.
Let me eat some of it. Leave some meat on the bone for me. Tyronn Lue, you're taking the words right out of my mouth.
Saturday, Sunday.
Because when I look at these coming off a tough, game that was played in the 80s, a defensive struggle, to come and play this type of game in an elimination game, even the way the Suns performed, I mean, yeah, they underperformed and weren't able to win the game, but you look at what Monty Williams does with that team, you look at what Tyronn Lue does, I'm looking at two very well-coached basketball teams.
Absolutely, Eddie.
And we talk about how LeBron James, players like LeBron James, players like KD, how they elevate the guys around them. When I'm looking at guys stepping up like Reggie Jackson, like Patrick Beverley, Nicholas Batum, you may not be much on the stat line, but he's putting his long arms, in passing lanes and getting all over the place. He's playing
smart basketball
he's
player.
Playing
knows
with
his
a lot
role.
of intensity. He knows what his job is. I'm thinking, where's this coming from? Because they're not getting it from Paul George. They're getting that hunger from Tyronn Lue. They're getting that energy from Tyronn Lue. And this is what he does
I like
for his
what Patrick
team.
Beverley is doing on that defense.
This is why his teams play so well and perform so well in some of the biggest series late in the years, late in the in the series, late in the playoffs. That's why he's always there. And that's why you look at the Lakers and why they made a decision to go away from a guy like Doc Rivers and to go with a guy like Tyronn Lue.
You mean Clippers? The Clippers?
I'm sorry, did I say the Lakers?
No,
I'm at the Clippers.
I mean LA.
That's why they went away from him, went with Tyronn Lue, and it's paying dividends now. The loss of Kawhi Leonard, I think you and I both agree, ultimately may just be too much for them to overcome. But I love watching these underdog type players, Reggie Jackson. And we're going to keep saying his name because he deserves it. This is a guy, he's a journeyman in the league.
Yes.
He's been in the league for years. We've seen him come through Houston, I think 1, 2, or 3 times.
And he's always had talent.
And he's always a guy who shows up. We call them lunch pail guys all the time who show up and they're going to give it their all. It's really something to see a guy in this moment like him elevate his game and play the way he's playing, hit the big shots that he's hitting. Him off the ball, like catching passes on the corner or on the wing from Paul George. He's been money from there. I don't think I've seen him miss too often. And even with a hand in his face, it seems like everything's falling for this guy. And this could be one of those instances. If Kawhi was there, everything may have aligned for them to go ahead and ride this wave into an NBA Finals and possibly even a championship. However, you mentioned, the partially torn ACL or whatever it is, and I know you don't want to guarantee that it would tear. You are guaranteed that he's not coming back, and it seems like that. We've speculated on injuries before that we thought were definite season enders. I think about the Patrick Mahomes knee injury where you and I both
about that.
We couldn't text each other fast enough. I think the texts waved at each other as they crossed through the wires. We both said he's done for the year.
Yeah,
we knew it right when we saw it. Lo and behold, he was back, and he was back faster than anybody would have ever imagined.
With a fractured kneecap.
I don't see that happening with Kawhi Leonard, but who knows? I mean, we don't know exactly what the problem with that knee is. They're keeping it. They're playing it real close to the vest. So we'll definitely find out eventually, I'm sure.
Because these are the Western Conference Finals, not the NBA Finals. So.
Absolutely. And if they find a way to even this series, I mean, it's anybody's ball game.
Absolutely.
But damn it, man. These two teams, two of the best coached teams left. I know you've got two real good ones on the other side in the East, but I don't think there's two doing it better right now or performing at a higher level right now as coaches than Monty Williams and Tyronn Lue.
Eddie, I totally concur. I mean, these two coaches definitely have their imprint and have established a culture with their respective teams. I mean, you talk about Monty Williams again. You see what he's been able to do, along with the help of Chris Paul, who's essentially like a coach himself on the floor. And so the Phoenix Suns, a team that everyone knows their role. They feed off the energy from the crowd. Now, they're going to have to get something from Mikal Bridges, who scored, I think, a total – who hasn't scored more than 6 points in 3 of these 5 ball games this series. And here's a guy, Mikal Bridges, who, when teams like the Clippers with this great defensive talent, even without Kawhi Leonard, you take a guy like Patrick Beverley. I love the way Patrick Beverley is playing. He's making Devin Booker work. Devin Booker loves, and Van Gundy said it the other night, he loves when Patrick Beverley is not guarding him, because Patrick Beverley is a tremendous defender. He's a pest, and he's going to make Devin Booker work, even though Devin Booker is a tremendous player, and he can light it up against anyone. He had 31 last night. But you've seen the imprint that these coaches have put on their team. A guy like Mikal Bridges, when teams like the Clippers and these teams, when they load up and they try to focus their attention on the two main stars, which is Chris Paul and Devin Booker, and of course DeAndre Ayton, he's establishing himself down low. He had 10 points, I think 11 rebounds last night, so he didn't have the same type of game that he's had prior to last night. But the thing about it is, Mikal Bridges is that guy who, when they're loading up on Chris Paul and Devin Booker, he's the guy who provides some quick offense, instant offense, and so keeps the defense honest. And he hasn't been able to do that. I think they're going to need him to step up. They're probably going to have to run more plays through DeAndre Ayton to soften up that defense some. But I'll tell you this is a chance for Paul George, Eddie, and he's been playing tremendous basketball in these playoffs. I told you his numbers in the playoffs. I mean, all 18 games, 20 points, at least 20 points, 41 points last night. But the thing about Paul George is he has a chance to establish himself, to really supplant himself as a true superstar. Now, we know the career he's had, and he's been a number one on a team like Indiana. But the thing about it, if he can find a way to get his team to the finals and ultimately win it, do you know what this does for his legacy, to be able to do it without Kawhi Leonard and with the help of his teammates and the way they can play defense and with the way Tyronn Lue. And I'm a guy who I'm a guy, Eddie, who actually I question Tyronn Lue, and you know I don't like to do that about my black coaches, but I call it like I see it, and I guess I was saying it wrong with Tyronn Lue, and really I wasn't saying it wrong, but my question was it was it actually LeBron James that actually got him that championship? But you know what? I was listening to Isaiah Thomas one day, and Isaiah Thomas, he really woke me up to something. He said, and it was this. He just said, if you look at when they came back against that 73-9 team against Tyronn Lue, and of course I love the guy. You know I want to see him succeed anyway. But against that 73-9 team, they came back from 3-1, but Tyronn Lue was the head coach of that team, and he deserves credit. He deserves credit for actually getting his team in a position to where they were mentally ready to stave off elimination and come back. And maybe he's the guy, well, not maybe, he is the guy who was the head coach when LeBron James probably did something that he probably didn't know he can do, that he probably didn't know that he could do, was come back from 3-1 against that team. But what he does, he holds his players accountable. They love playing for him. He can relate to them, and he does not pull any punches. He's going to tell it like it is. Like Paul George said last night when they were at halftime or when they were down, because if you look at the game prior, they could not hit a shot to save their life. I mean, they had so many chances. Phoenix was trying to give them that game. They were trying to give them that game 4. And the Clippers just did not want it because they could not hit shots. But what Paul George said, he was like, get y'all effing in gear and let's go. And he tells it like it is. But he's the guy that came back from 3-1. He's the guy that's come back from 2-0-2 deficits in these playoffs, 2-0-2 deficits against the Mavericks and the last series as well. So now he's trying to do it against Phoenix right now. So we'll see what happens. Now he has to come back down from 3-1. But, man, the guy is doing a tremendous job. And he's obviously a great coach. He knows how to make adjustments on the fly. And, hey, I love what the guy is doing.
Hey, and it certainly helps that Paul George has sort of, resurrected himself, or I should say resurrected playoff P, as they like to call him, because he's been steady and consistent and performing at a high level since he's been called upon to carry the torch when Kawhi Leonard went down. Now, there's still some reports out that say, man, Kawhi – could he play, coming up in Game 6? We don't know what's going to happen with Kawhi. But one thing I think that we do know now is that Paul George is definitely good enough for this team to win and good enough for this team to win this series. If the San Antonio, I'm lost, man. If the Phoenix Suns don't get it in gear and kind of snap out of this little bit of funk that they've been in, shooting the basketball wise, because when Devin Booker's hitting his shots at a high clip, he's one of the best in the business. I know we mentioned Trae Young earlier and how he's putting the league on notice. I think you could say a little bit of the same thing about Devin Booker and his performance so far this year in the postseason.
Yeah,
but
he's a star.
These past 2 games, I got to admit, they've done a bad job in letting the Clippers hang around, and then we saw last night that they let him hang around to the point where they finally caught fire and just pulled away. They blew the doors off of him in the fourth quarter. I mean, that game was really close, nip and tuck all the way through the third, and then LA just pulls away.
Well, that tells you, were you finished with that?
Yeah, go ahead.
No, but that tells you about their resilience. I mean, again, the Mavericks, the Utah Jazz, that shows you again. And you got to give most of that credit, all the credit. Well, not all the credit. You have to give the players credit too.
Give it all.
You got to give Tyronn Lue a lot of credit for keeping these guys mentally engaged, mentally focused. And you got to give those guys credit for realizing, hey, this is the playoffs, and it's not over until it's over. And they're doing everything possible to keep themselves alive. And we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens tomorrow night. But if Chris Paul can get into the paint and get that little jumper that he has right there on the elbow, and he can do that, they have a great shot. And of course, again, they're going to have to, I think, feature DeAndre Ayton a little bit more on the block, at least dump the ball into him, and probably get a couple of those guys in foul trouble, because They did it without Zubac.
I was like, yeah, you got to take advantage with no Zubats, and you feel like they didn't do that.
Mm-hmm. Right. So we'll see what happens. But two well-coached teams. I mean, well-coached teams. And, hey, if either one of these guys advance, I'll be happy for them. I would love to see Chris Paul get a championship ring.
I already know where
at this point. Yeah, I mean, I would love to see Chris Paul get a championship ring.
After all the hard work he's put in, and you see what he's done and what he's capable of doing when the health holds up. And man, I think we'd all love to see it.
He's had a resurgence.
I mean, he's one of those he's like a master chess player, and you'd love to see him playing on the biggest stage.
Absolutely,
and playing that game, playing that opponent, whoever it may be, coming over in the East. Now, B Done Did It commented on the YouTube stream. He says it's too much of a risk for Kawhi Leonard at this point in his career. And that's why he won't be back.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that if the Clippers had their way, they don't care. Like they would have Kawhi if he'll do it.
They're paying him a lot of money.
They'll have him come back. I think they would sell it all for that championship, that one ever elusive championship. I think they lay it all on the line. And if Kawhi didn't want to come back, or if he got injured and was unable to to play for them any longer, I don't think they'd care. I think they'd trade it for that ring.
That's interesting right there. Now, Kawhi is very cautious with injuries.
I mean, you hear about people cutting off some very important body parts to get a ring.
Like running lots. But Kawhi.
And that was just a finger.
That was just a finger. Now, but I'm saying.
We heard what Mike Vrabel said.
If he comes back, what did Mike Vrabel say?
That he'd give one of his testicles.
Hey, well, I tell you what, if Kawhi comes back from that knee injury, and I concur, that is a risky move. But, hey, he knows how his body feels. He knows if he's 100%, if that swelling has gone down, if they're doing the MRI and they don't see any kind of even a partial tear in there. But sometimes those MRIs do not pick up. I mean, it could be a partial. Hey, that's a again, and I'm basing it on the way that knee buckled and me having gone through the exact same thing and my knee buckled the exact same way. When I seen it buckle, and they said it was a sprain, I said that's a partially torn ACL right there, and I'll be shocked if he comes back in these playoffs. But we shall see. Now, if he does come back, Eddie, and they're able to win tomorrow night and ultimately take Game 7, we know Game 7s are anybody's game. Of course, they will be playing in Phoenix if that happens with that raucous crowd, and we know. And so again, with the Clippers' talent and that veteran leadership, again, with Patrick Beverley being the dog he is, and I think it's understated how important he is to that team, a la P.J. Tucker with the Milwaukee Bucks. Now, what do you think about Trae? Now, you mentioned Trae Young, and we all know what he's been able to do in these playoffs especially, but just what he's been able to do this part in his early career, right there on par with Luka. I mean, this guy is a superstar in this league.
Even though they're down 2-1, I mean, that doesn't have a whole lot to do with Trae Young.
What do you think about the ankle?
He's brought man, I don't know, dude. That's a tough one.
Because he has a bone bruise, and he may not. He's going to play tonight.
As far as playing, he's going to play.
He's going to play.
How I think it's going to affect him?
Yeah.
I don't know, because I mean, he's very crafty when he gets to the basket. I mentioned Steph Curry when talking about him last week, because he kind of reminds me the way Curry sort of blew up on the scene. It kind of reminds me what's going on with Trae Young here. Reminds me of Steph. When he gets by defenders, his ability to be low, to stay low, just come off the ground maybe a couple inches, lay the ball up off the glass.
Mm-hmm.
You got to be strong in your ankles to do those kind of things.
That runner.
The way he uses his body inside the paint when he's driving to the basket is phenomenal. Like I said, it really reminds me of Steph, because Steph's very crafty the way he gets some of his layups. So the only thing with Trae is I think Trae's a little bit better and a little bit quicker off that first step. Getting by defenders. He's a little bit more,
He's a little more explosive with
too.
that.
Yeah,
right.
There you go.
Right.
That's a perfect perfect word for it. Even like I say, even though they're down 2-1, I feel like this entire playoff
Steph is so
performance. I think Trae Young has put the entire NBA on notice. He let them know, like, hey, there's a changing of the guard here. You used to LeBron, KD's, guys of that nature. Well, there's new kids on the block. You got Trae Young, you got Devin Booker, but as it pertains to Trae Young, I saw I don't remember if it's an article or just a post somebody had posted, but there's a lot of people right now that believe that Trae Young is a better number one to start your team with, and then you leave age out of it, than Kyrie Irving ever was. And what do you
Oh,
think
I
about
agree with
what do you
that.
think about that, Greg? And to think about
You know what?
all the
I've been
hype
hard on
surrounding
Kyrie.
you know, and it was,
Yeah.
even when he came in the league, you know.
Right. Well, he only played like 8 games at Duke, even though he was the number 1 pick. A tremendous talent. But I'll say it again. I still think, and again, a tremendous talent can light it up. I mean, can go for 45 or 50 on any given night. But I still think he's a tad bit overrated in my humble opinion. And I just don't think he makes his teammates better. I think Trae Young is the type of guy, if I had to pick between those two, the way I've seen Trae Young ascend, I would go with Trae Young. He just now, granted, he has shooters around him.
Hey, what have you done for me lately? He looks really good.
He looks really good, and he's more willing to get his shooters involved. I think Trae is the type of guy, he can get his points. He can go off on the offensive end, but he still keeps everyone engaged and involved, and these guys are knocking down shots for him. And, man, I mean, I would have to go with Trae Young right there. Again, that floater that he has, that runner that he has, I mean, it is so pure, and it is on point. I'm talking about every time he releases it, it almost seems like it goes in. I mean, when does that happen? I mean,
it kind of reminds you of like Steph's three.
I know, right?
He can't be like aiming that. He can't be shooting at the basket. He's just throwing it up in the air, and he's lucky. It
nothing
just
but
falls
nets.
in the hoop. Yeah,
nothing but nets. But now, one thing about the Atlanta Hawks, tremendous skill. Now that ankle, that bone bruise, we don't know, because the thing about a bone bruise is that just takes time to heal. So he can get all the treatment he wants, and of course, the treatment will probably speed up the process a bit. But it's not like it's soft tissue when it could probably rapidly speed the healing process. So that bone bruise, it's just going to take time, and it's about his tolerance level and how much will he be able to play with that pain that he's going to be playing under. But you know what? Hey, man, Atlanta, they have a lot of shooters. The only thing about Atlanta is you have Bogdanovich, who's been injured. He's laboring on that knee. They've gotten this far. You have Cam Reddish out, DeAndre Hunter out. I mean, but I love John Collins. You're talking about Trae Young. Trae Young and John Collins, Eddie, they remind me they can be the next John Stockton and Karl Malone. And I'm talking about John Collins being a more athletic Karl Malone. Of course, we all know Karl Malone is one of the best power forwards to ever play the game. But John Collins and Trae Young, that duo for the next 10 years is going to be special what they can do. And the thing about John Collins, he can stretch out and knock down a three, but his athleticism, this guy, John Collins has star written all over him. So you get some guys back like DeAndre Hunter and these guys and Cam Reddish, the sky's the limit for the Atlanta Hawks. Now, as far as this series, it's unfortunate that he had to go down with that injury the other night. He was laboring, so right after that happened, Milwaukee took off. That gave Chris Middleton that extra boost. He went off for 38. Of course, Giannis is doing this thing, but the Hawks are so dependent on Trae Young and his penetration and kicking the ball out to his shooters. I mean, I think they're definitely going to be affected if he's not able to do that. Now, Milwaukee is already getting physical. I mean, tell me about it. So now what the Bucks are doing, the Bucks are lucky. But you know what? Sometimes in order to win a championship, you have to be lucky. I mean, they caught a Nets team who were injured, who eventually were without Kyrie Irving, and obviously
LeBron. Last time Tyronn Lue and LeBron James won a championship, whenever they were
it
able to beat Golden State, and Draymond Green was suspended for a crucial game 6, crucial game 6.
Yeah, and that was bogus.
And that turned the tide in the entire series, obviously. And Cleveland goes on to win. So yeah, it does a little bit of luck. It never hurts.
That's true. I agree, man. So what Milwaukee has been doing as of late, now they've been more physical. If they can keep Trae out the paint, they've been very, very physical and trying to get rugged with Atlanta.
You're not keeping Trae out of the paint. I mean, unless he's
just like
he's really laboring.
Like that.
But that was a good point that you made, because Chris Middleton did go off after that. Those 38 points clearly were the big difference in Game 3.
You have to seize the opportunity.
Hey, I expect the Hawks to bounce back in Game 4, man. I'm big time on this Hawks bandwagon.
Well, yeah. I jumped on the bandwagon right when the playoffs started myself.
You mentioned that Collins, and everything that he can do. You would like to see that guy, the intensity level that he plays with, the energy that he plays with. It's amazing. But you'd like to see him be able to play with that energy for some of the extended minutes that some of the other stars are playing for.
Yeah.
You're not getting 30 minutes out of him. You're getting more like 25, or less.
Yeah.
25 to 27 minutes. And you really need that guy out there for 30 plus.
And I think they should feature him more. The same way I said about DeAndre Ayton, I think they should put him on the block because he can score with his back to the basket as well. I think they should feature him more. Now, they need some more out of Lou Williams because the thing about it with the Hawks on the defensive side of the ball, I mean, now you have Trey laboring as well. You have these guys limping around, and Giannis is going to be he's going to try to attack the basket at any means necessary. Chris Middleton is finding his groove. Even though Drew Holiday hasn't really found his groove on offense, he's still, along with P.J. Tucker, he provides that toughness on the defensive side of the ball, and he keeps those guys believing that they have a chance to win just with his energy and his passion and the way he goes about handling his business. But the thing about it, Lou Williams, when Trey leaves the game, now that's what Atlanta needs moving forward, in my opinion. They need someone else who can handle the ball and create for others, and they need another playmaker because most of the guys that they have on the team right now are tremendous shooters, spot-up shooters. Herter, spot-up shooter, Bogdanovich, Gallinari. So
they need Lou. They need 5 years ago Lou. They need
that's where I was about to go with that.
They need Lou from about 5 years ago.
Right.
Lou minus a nickel.
A 3-time Sixth Man of the Year. Or
yeah.
The 2-time. Yeah. So and the thing about Lou, he's a problem on the defense side of the ball because he's not a big, strong guy. So when you put him in, so not only is he not giving you the Lou Williams.
You can see the Bucks start to bully them around a little bit.
Absolutely. So, hey, we shall see what happens. But again, it's all about these role players stepping up. So we shall see.
So, hey, before we move on and talk a little bit of baseball and talk about the Astros,
let's go.
Let's bring it back and talk. We didn't get to mention it, or you may not have heard it from us because of what happened last week. But the Rockets are going to have their pick in the first round this year, and they're going to pick at number 2, and they're going to have a whole lot of players to pick with, minus Cunningham.
Can you tell them what happened to us last week first?
Hey, last week we just had something come up over the show that was an open window in the browser. I don't know how it came through OBS, but it did, and I couldn't hear it in my headphones. We didn't
know till the show was over.
But hey, it doesn't matter. It's in the past.
Things happen.
And,
absolutely.
We're over.
Absolutely.
We're on to the next show.
We were over.
On to the next court case. You're listening to the Sports Court on a Tuesday. The Sports Court where a bad take is downright criminal, and we will lock your ass up if you bring one to us. But before we talk Astros, I do want to talk about the Rockets.
Yes, sir.
And some of the players that they may be looking at, and a long shot trade rumor that I heard that the Mavericks might be interested in a high pick and some other things if things aren't working out between them and their young phenom, Luka Doncic.
Yeah, and we already know the turmoil that's going on over there.
Right, all kinds of turmoil between Luka and
management. But now they have Jason Kidd in the fold.
It's almost similar, and it's almost similar to what's going on in Houston. Somebody has the owner's ear. Is making the owner make decisions that's running some long people that have been here for a long time are now starting to leave. The head coach is leaving. The GM's gone.
Yeah.
And
because the players have all the power.
Right. And the young Luka Doncic is looking around. He says, man, this looks like what Deshaun Watson is going through in Houston with the Texans. I better get up out of here before it's too late. As a matter of fact,
he's only 22.
Why don't I go on
somebody that a superstar that young can call the shots. But usually they're like up in tenure, at least 5, 7, 8 years.
But the shift in the NBA and what's happened now, they can. And if you're going to strike while the iron is hot, if you're the Mavericks, one of those picks up near the top of the draft, I think 1 or 2, along with a whole other package of picks and players.
So Trey looking to the Rockets?
It may be enough to get them to bite. I don't know.
Come on, man. I love that. It's my favorite player in the NBA. I mean,
I don't know if Mark
KD
Cuban
too.
would do it, but if the Rockets put together the best package for him, I mean, these kind of things get talked about. Sometimes it's just some crazy idea that someone dreamed up, and sometimes it's talked about because the player's looking for possibilities, and the agents are putting it out there. Hey, Houston has what it takes to get you. Such and such, this team has what it takes to get you. What is your interest in these teams? And they put it out there in the media to see how the team may react to it or how the people may react to it, how the players may react to it. Hey, man, if Luka Doncic was to don the red and white, it'd be a whole new era. You tell me we go from having
I would get
James
season
Harden
tickets.
to Luka Doncic, and now we can start this whole thing over again. You've got another decade to try to build a champion.
To go along, if you can keep Christian Wood.
I think Christian Woods is untouchable.
Oh man, would be something serious right there. I would love to see that. And kudos to Chauncey Billups as well as Jason Kidd for lassoing those jobs. And of course, there are other openings that need to be filled. And Rick Carlisle, the aforementioned Dallas Mavericks, Rick Carlisle is actually in Boston now. So we're going to see how that works out. He has two young stars in Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum to work with. A tremendous coach. Things just didn't work out in Dallas. He was ready to go. And we'll see where they go from there. We'll see how Luka and Jason Kidd mesh. Of course, Jason Kidd, a former point guard in his own right, Hall of Famer, and tremendous point guard. Style a lot like Luka, makes his teammates better, likes to pass the ball, a passing wizard. So I'm sure they're going to be able to relate on a lot of levels. We'll see how that works out. But I would love to see Luka with the Rockets, Eddie, and we shall see. Now, speaking of Houston teams.
Hey, real quick.
Go ahead.
I just want you to talk about a couple of those players that are available. In particular, Evan Mobley, who a lot of people say they might take. Two-way guy, skilled on the offensive end. I think after Clint Capella, Rockets fans may be a little weary of the big guy. But if you could just add what Mobley has to Capella's game, you'd have a perennial all-star.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely.
He's got a much more polished offensive game.
7-1.
The footwork, the handling of the basketball, completely different from what Clint Capella was. And so you think,
with Christian Wood?
I don't want them to go with center. Center, it just doesn't sound sexy to me.
He's more like a power forward, like a stretch forward.
He is a new age center at 7 foot tall. His ability to handle the basketball and his feet are what make him
can play away from the basket.
A very coveted asset in this NBA draft class. And then I also want to talk about
let me expound on that real quick.
Okay, go ahead.
On that real quick about Evan Mobley from USC, 7-footer, and a lot of people liken him to Chris Bosh. But here's a guy that can play away from the basket, athletic, so you know you can get out in transition with this guy. He can protect the rim. And, of course, he has a low post game to boot. So that'll be, you pair him with Christian Wood. Now you have two very athletic 6'11", 7-foot twin towers that's not your traditional centers, like you say. Those are guys who can actually, who's very athletic. They're both very athletic.
Man, that
they
twin
can play away
towers
from the
thing
basket.
is never gonna die. We're gonna hear twin. Anytime two tall ass dudes are put in the front
towers.
court, you're
Ralph
gonna hear
Sampson
twin
and
towers.
Hakeem back in the day, man, I used to love watching those guys. If Ralph wouldn't have hurt his knees, I mean, one could imagine what the Rockets would have been able to do back then with those guys. Ralph Sampson. When I talk about college centers, I always leave out Ralph Sampson. And Ralph Sampson at Virginia was probably the most, since Lou Alcindor was the most highly touted center ever to come out of college. 7'4". I still remember the Sports Illustrated. We used to subscribe to Sports Illustrated, me and my brother, when we were kids. Had you see how these pictures and stuff on the wall? We had pictures cut out from all the Sports Illustrateds from just years and years back, all the way up until my senior year in high school. As a matter of fact, I even went to college at Ohio State, and the whole room was just full of pictures, man. You can go back to the early 70s where those pictures, some of those pictures were coming from. But one of those pictures that were on there was from Ralph Sampson. I had Barkley, the round mound of rebound when he was at Auburn eating a pizza in the dorm room. And Ralph Sampson, 7'4" and still growing. But Ralph Sampson was a tremendous college basketball player. Again, Akeem was the best college center I've ever seen, and Shaquille O'Neal. Those two. But Ralph was highly touted. But Twins, hey, we will see what the Rockets
with
do.
Evan Mobley.
Cade Cunningham is going to be there, Eddie. What do you think about him?
You think he's going to be there at number 2?
Oh, at number 2, he's going number 1.
Yeah.
He's going
well,
number 1.
I have heard that.
So what about
it's
Suggs
not
from Gonzaga?
That Suggs may draw some interest from Detroit. I don't know. See, Jalen Suggs. I prefer Jalen Green to Jalen Suggs.
He has a game like
call
Kobe.
Call me crazy. All right, but I like Jalen Green
I do
better.
too.
I like the size. I like the versatility.
Shooting guard.
Yeah. I think, in this age, shooting guard with point guard skills
Right.
that can play the
Combo
three as
guard.
well. If you bring in
Right.
a superstar shooter or whatever,
With all these wing superstars,
Man.
somebody who can evolve as a great defensive player on the wing as well, and he can go get his shot and get his points. I agree. I agree.
So I'd like to see him. I think it's
I
going to
like
come
him as
down.
well.
I think it's going to come down to those three guys.
Yeah, it is.
And I'm curious to see Mobley. Hard talent
He's
to
intriguing,
pass up.
yeah.
Hard talent to pass up.
It is.
But also when you're
It
trying, when you feel like you're trying to replace a superstar in your backcourt after losing James Harden, I mean those are some big shoes to fill. And I think a guy like Jalen Green, he's got the potential to do that, or at least as much potential as anybody in this entire draft class.
He kind of has some game like Devin Booker.
Now, if I see Evan Mobley do one dream shake in an Instagram story or Instagram reel, or if I see him do one turnaround, swish, fade away, look just a little bit like Hakeem, I'm gonna be all in on Mobley.
Hey, well, you know what? Here's a guy that's 7 foot, and if he
Because
comes to Houston,
he comes here, there it is.
Hakeem is gonna tutor him, and the Rockets are gonna make sure that happens.
You saw what he taught Yao Ming,
right? I mean,
the
there's another guy.
The Shanghai Shake had
Absolutely.
its own sauce
Man, I
to
miss
it, man.
Yao,
That
man.
was some good stuff.
Yao, I mean, that's another center.
If Yao
he
never
wouldn't
got
have gotten
hurt,
injured,
man.
Yao would have been. I like Yao, man. I love his character. I just love the way he adjusted.
How you gonna
to
block
his
his
country.
turnaround and fade away?
I know, man.
There's
seven,
no
what
way.
is 7'5" he was?
7'6", yeah.
7 foot, man. I mean, that guy there, man, he was nice. And
He
Shaq
popped
had
the
a lot
bottom
of
the
respect.
net.
Speaking
He
of
popped
Shaq,
the bottom of the net.
right? Yeah, exactly. Shaq had a lot of respect for Yao Ming as well. I mean, a nice guy, man. I hate he was beset by those injuries, but Evan Mobley definitely has the athleticism to learn what it takes. And if he was tutored by Hakeem Olajuwon, wow, watch out. Now, the only thing you want to hope is that he has the motor. That's the main thing you have to look for in these guys. What kind of heart do they have? Now, I haven't watched enough of him to know. I don't know the scouting report on him in that regard. But what kind of motor? Because if you have the motor like a Zion Williamson or somebody like that, you're going to get better because you're going to eventually your game is going to evolve just because you're putting the work in. So we'll see. But I like that Evan Mobley. I like Jalen Green as well. And I like Suggs because we don't think Cade Cunningham will be there. So we shall see. But the Rockets were able to lasso that number 2 pick. Me and Eddie talked about it last week before the NBA lottery, the NBA draft lottery. I strictly said, I was like, hey, the Rockets are going to get the number 2 pick. Now, I know they're talking about, their chances of this or that, but I've always felt that the NBA had their hands on who got what pick. That's just me. And
they're not giving it to Houston.
Well, they're not going to get the number 1 pick to Houston,
Yeah.
but I said they're going to get a top 2 pick, and that's
Yeah.
what happened now. You can say they had the chances or whatever, and they probably would.
I think
The
they
Rockets were
realized
not
that
going
the
to get a
Rockets
pick after losing what they lost.
Yeah, I think they realized
than
if the
two.
Rockets don't get to keep that pick, it may set them back and set the entire franchise and the NBA market in Houston back for many, many years because they realize people in Houston are already turned off to certain sports by what's going on with their football team, by what happened to their basketball team this season. And for them to miss out on the opportunity to draft there after making all these trades and losing all these pieces, I think the fan base would have just been burnt out.
Yeah.
And maybe have just turned away from the NBA. We've seen it happen before in this
Absolutely.
city and in other cities where they just shun the NBA and shun their team if the team is that bad. I mean, we saw it happen in Dallas
Well,
before
think about
Cuban, resurrected that team.
Right. And think about it too, Eddie, before we move on. Think about this as well. Christian Wood was hurt a lot last year.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, the Rockets.
That sort of started the tank because don't
Yes, it
forget
did.
whenever
That's where I was going with that.
when he came in and started playing, they had a pretty nice winning streak put together.
Absolutely.
And then he gets hurt, and they realize they can't win without him, and then all of a sudden the tank is on in full force.
Absolutely. So Christian Wood coming back, a great draft pick. John Wall will even be another year removed from those injuries, and he's still only, 30 years old, 31 years old. He's still a jet up and down the court. You have John Wall running the point, who can go for 20, 25, 30 on any given night. Let's not lose sight of the fact that John Wall was a former number 1 pick, former All-Star. So it's not like you have chopped liver at the point guard position. So again, with Christian Wood, if Evan Mobley, if that's the pick, and his learning curve can be quick, or Jalen Green, he can come in there and light it up. I mean, the Rockets can be very competitive as of next year, and maybe they'll be more better. They'll be better more sooner
More
than later.
better. You heard it.
More
They'll
better
be
blues.
more better.
More better blues. So maybe they'll
Hey.
be more better.
Or after watching Trae Young win this conference final series and go on and compete for an NBA title, maybe they do go with the guy like Jalen Suggs, a two-way point guard who's a
Great leader as well.
a rim runner as well as a great defender. And
Floor
you mentioned
general,
too,
right.
the first thing that people say when they talk about Jalen Suggs is tremendous leadership. And I've seen floor general written on every single scouting report that I've read on this guy.
Yep.
So
I was getting recruited at quarterback
although
by
I'm
the top colleges.
Although
even the
I'm a
Buckeyes.
gambler, so I like to go with the guy that I think may have a lower floor but a super high ceiling.
Right.
And
right.
that's the Jalen Green. But Jalen Suggs, somebody's going to get them a damn good basketball player when they draft that young man. And if it's the Rockets, I'm not going to be mad about that either.
Absolutely. And speaking of Jalen Green, real quick before we move on, and I like shooting guards, and I didn't think you were hip to Jalen Green like that. I've been hip to him for a while, and he's kind of flown under the radar. But whoever gets him is going to get a tremendous talent.
He's one of them young, wiry guys.
Yeah, he is.
Like KD.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Not as
Speaking
big,
of KD,
but
man,
wiry.
I still remember KD. Before we move on, I still remember KD in that McDonald's All-American game his senior year in high school before he went to UT for that freshman year. Of course, he left after that, was the number 2 pick behind Greg Oden from Ohio State.
Yep.
Yeah, who was beset by injuries. I think he would have been a damn good NBA player as well. But I never forget when KD hit that 3-pointer in that McDonald's All-American game. I was like, who is that? I mean, this guy's 6'11" out there playing guard. I'm like, so I've been hip to KD since that McDonald's game his senior year. But we'll see what Jalen Green is able to do and muster up in the NBA. I think he has a tremendous upside as well, Eddie. But speaking of upside, what about our Houston Astros?
Lately, the Astros, after being super, super hot, have slowed down a bit. They split series in Detroit. Although there was some rain delays and bad weather that may have affected the outcome in those games, and then the Orioles found a way to come back and win a game last night that I don't think they should have won. It showed losing that game or letting that game slip away late in the ninth after already taking a lead in the eighth. I think that shows where a lot of the concern for this team is, and that's in the back end of the bullpen.
Yeah.
You've got those guys that are like fringe guys, fringe starter relievers, and you like what they can give you. But if you don't have your ace in the hole, which is Presley, and you go with one of these guys that hasn't really done anything for you productive, like a Brooks Raley, I'm not surprised that happened. I mean, I told you last time, Brooks Raley is good for at least 2 runs almost every time he takes the hill.
Right.
And if that guy, if you're going to pitch that guy, you got to be okay with that. So you're saying you're okay with blowing games like this, and I don't think that's how Dusty Baker thinks. So they've got to find a replacement for him. They got to find a way to beef up that bullpen a little bit. They've got guys that can give them innings, but they need guys.
You think about a trade deadline?
They need guys that can get them out. If that makes any sense, they got guys that can give them innings, but they need guys that can get them out. If you need 2 outs and it's not Presley, you got to have a guy who can go in there and get that for you.
Because in the playoffs, that's what it comes down to. It comes down to who has the best pitching, who's able to keep these guys on the other side from scoring runs.
It's situational too, Greg. I got to have a guy that I can trust to come in. And I can't have relievers who only perform well when they start out the inning.
Right.
I need guys who can come in and pressure situations, runners in scoring position, because that's going to happen after the 10th inning if we're in an extra inning ball game, or if the previous pitcher didn't have a good outing and maybe the bases are loaded, 2 runners in scoring position. I need a guy who's going to be able to come in and get that out. And I feel like the Astros, aside from Presley, they don't have that guy. They don't have that one guy you guarantee can come get that out.
The trade deadline.
I think they have to. I think they at least have to explore
Who would they have to give up?
I don't know. We know that the cupboard is full, and that there are plenty of players that other teams covet up and down that roster, and even in the farm system. I just don't know if they're going to find the right fit, the team that needs what they have and has what they need.
They recall Andre Scrub from AAA, a right-hand pitcher.
Yeah, well named.
Yeah,
well named, because he's been nothing but scrubbish. I mean, I'm sorry. I remember when they acquired this guy. I liked his size. I liked his stuff. But his last few performances, or the last few times that I've seen him perform, have not been good.
Right. It's almost like, why did they call him back up, huh?
Being there for him walking in runs against LA, run after run. That kind of did it for me with Andre Scrub. You know, the Dodgers coming into our house and big game late in the eighth or ninth inning. I can't remember I think it was the ninth inning. And you're walking in run after run after run. That's what I'm talking about. You come in with the bases loaded. The Astros need an out. Scrub couldn't get it done. And as a matter of fact, he did the opposite, and he came unraveled on the mound, and it led to a big loss.
Right. And see, what I've seen with the Astros, even with their relievers, they have the talent. So hopefully, for our sake and the Astros' sake and the Astros fans' sake, that hopefully going through these trials and tribulations will only make them better as the year progresses. And so when they get to the playoffs, they've gone through some tough situations, some pressure situations that they know that they can work themselves and wiggle themselves out of because they've been there before. So maybe this is all par for the course, part of their journey to actually get to where they want to get to. And so hopefully, if Dusty continues to manage those guys the right way, and like you said, he uses his rotations the right way, because that's the thing. When he gets to the playoffs, he's going to have to know when not to pull a guy and when to pull a guy. And so there's been times with Dusty in the past, even though Dusty has always been a great manager, love Dusty Baker, doing a tremendous job this year, but there's been times where Dusty would not make the most just put it like this, the best decisions at the most opportune times when it comes to his pitching staff. I mean, he did not make the most astute decisions a lot of times, and hopefully that's not the case now. Maybe he's learned from some of that, and he knows how long to pitch a guy, not to burn a guy out or something to that effect. I mean, so we'll see what the Astros are able to do now. Granted, the offense, even though Detroit was able to stymie them, the Detroit Tigers are a team who obviously they're not playing like the Detroit Tigers of years past, but they're a team with some young talent, and they're gritty. And you saw they were able to stymie, and like you said, it could have something to do with the weather. They were able to stymie the Astros offense, a red-hot offense, the best offense in baseball as a whole. They were able to stymie them a few of those games, a couple of games. I don't think the Astros got more than 2
was pitching
runs.
really well when he was out there.
Right.
But, as far as late inning relievers or guys who they should go after, we talk about Brooks Raley, and you think, well, the guy's, if he's that bad, if he's as bad as I'm making him sound, why does he keep getting put out there? But it's because there aren't a lot of lefties in that Astros bullpen, especially ones that they can use late in the game or where they have any confidence in at all. Taylor Rogers of the Twins is a guy that I think needs to be on their radar when it comes toward looking for a guy that can be a late inning guy. I know he's billed as a setup guy or a closer. I think the Astros could even use him as that middle, the guy
Just
before
give him
the
the damn
setup.
ball and tell him to go get 3 to 6 outs.
The way you're using your bullpen,
Or
you
9.
don't always have to use the same setup guy,
Right.
and having a left-hander who can do that, it would be huge for the Astros because they don't have that. And so I just think they really need to. If you're asking me, is there somebody that should be on their radar? Taylor Rogers of the Twins, and he'll be under team control through 2022. So it's not like you're just going to rent him for 1 year. You'll get him for next year as well. Bring this guy on board. Let me see what he's got. He's got a 33% strikeout rate and a 4.7% walk rate. This is a guy that doesn't put people on base for free and is hard to hit off of.
Hey, with Astros, to your point, can definitely use a guy like that. And speaking of the Astros and that potent offense, we see what they're doing in the All-Star balloting. I mean, I think they have the most, matter of fact, I know they have the most guys on the All-Star ballot who's still left standing right now, like 7 or 8, if I'm not mistaken. So it goes to show you how much of a forgiving country this is, so to speak. I mean, if you look at it, and the Astros, the way they were belittled and ostracized because of the cheating scandal and, oh, we hate the Astros, yada, yada, yada. All me and you kept saying, if you come out there and you prove that you can do it legitimately, because we know that they had the talent on the team and we know that they could do it. That's why a lot of these people were so mad at them, because you look up and down that lineup and the talent is there. So, and all we've kept saying, even before the season started, just come out and do what you have to do. And you see that the fans, for the most part, seem like they've forgiven them and they're rewarding them with this All-Star voting and saying, okay, you guys are legit now, and look at the numbers you're putting up and down that lineup. You have Altuve, Correa, Bregman, Michael Brantley. I mean, you can go on and on. I mean, the Astros right now, that cheating scandal seems like so long ago because of the way they're playing baseball, and hopefully they can continue. Now, it helped last year as well, last season, that they were able to get to the American League Championship Series.
Right.
Now, they didn't get to the World Series, but that helped. And now that they're continuing to play like this, I think fans are taking notice and they're realizing, hey, these guys are just good. They can mash. And so that's what's happening. So the All-Star game was what, July the 10th, I think it is?
I think so.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at that, the ballot, the Astros, like you mentioned, having the most players on the ballot. However, no player sits atop their position.
Yeah.
They're either second, third, or somewhere in the mix.
Mm-hmm.
And when you get to the outfield, I think there's 6. Is it 6 that they do or 9? I think
Players that's
yeah.
on the ballot. I think
Yeah.
is it 8? Is it 8?
I think it's 9.
Okay, 8 or 9. Yeah, they're
For
going to
the
cruise.
outfield.
Right.
Yeah.
And guys like Bryce
Yeah,
Harper, my
it's
guy,
9.
he shouldn't make it this year, but fan voting, you know how that goes.
Well, then here's the deal. When you get into that second round of voting, a lot of times the hometown sort of drives the first round of voting. Now, when you get in that second round, you'll have guys voting for players on other teams. It's where you start to see the people who pay attention to the game. You start to see their votes start to weed out the players who maybe aren't as deserving, and some of the
That's
others
just
start
how
to
the
rise
name-
up.
right,
and then
right.
you see some of the favorites. But no, I'm not gonna trash the voters or anything. I think a lot of times, except for in
it's about
certain
that money, too.
situations, I think a lot of times the player that deserves to be the starter in the All-Star game usually ends up being the starter.
Mm-hmm. Well, Mike Trout hasn't even played in weeks and weeks and weeks, but he's Mike Trout.
But that's one of those, and yeah,
So if he's
number
healthy,
one.
he's going to play.
That's one of those ones right there. That could be an example of where it kind of works the opposite, because Mike Trout is the biggest name in baseball.
Absolutely. And Shohei Ohtani, speaking of the Angels real quick, I mean, what about this guy? You're talking about an Asian player that's come over here and he's lived up to all the hype. I mean, he has 25 home runs right now, can throw 100 miles an hour, 26 home runs.
60 RBIs.
Wow, with Vlad Guerrero Jr. and Fernando Tatis Jr. I mean, Bryce Harper, I'm going to just say it like this, Eddie. He's no longer my favorite player in the league.
Man.
Yeah, man. I had to cut my boy Bryce loose, man. I mean, Fernando Tatis Jr. is my favorite player. Don't get me wrong. I still cut for Bryce, but I still like Bryce. But he is what he is at this
I thought
point.
you were going to go with Shohei.
No, with Shohei,
your new favorite.
No, I love Shohei, though. I love what he can do. I hate that he plays for the Angels. That franchise right there, it's just something about that franchise. It's just, he'll probably never make a playoff appearance.
I think there's another guy
Anaheim
that's pretty
either.
good that plays for that team, too. Who is,
Rendon.
Mike Trout.
And we know Mike
Of
Trout.
course.
But that's the thing. I mean, that's the thing. Mike Trout, we see he hasn't been able to get now. Of course, Mike Trout will come back. And the Angels have still been, Shohei has been keeping them afloat until Mike Trout comes back. Rendon, if he can stay healthy. Now you have Justin Upton out. They have the talent, but they just never seem to put the pitching together to where that talent on the offensive side can propel them to a playoff berth. So, I want to see Mike Trout in the playoffs. And Shohei, Shohei has some
It's because
pop.
they're in the division with the H, man. You're not getting through the Astros, and you're not getting through the Athletics. And if you got through the Athletics, you're not getting through the
that
Astros.
talent,
It ain't
Mike
happening.
Trout, Ohtani. But I love what Ohtani is doing. Him, Vlad Guerrero Jr., and Fernando Tatis Jr. And again, about Fernando Tatis, and we've talked about him on the show. I mean, Vlad Guerrero Jr., this guy he may get the Triple Crown in the American League, and he's the early favorite for the MVP in the American League. I mean, superb young talent. Fernando, same way. I love his swag, the energy he plays with, and he's producing. So, hey, we'll see did you hear Jeff Bagwell call the game the other day for the Astros?
I sure did.
I like that.
He's magnificent.
I like Jeff Bagwell, man.
Jeff is so good at what he does, and you hear him.
Loved him as a player, of course.
When you listen to him give his analysis, you understand why he was such a good hitter.
Absolutely.
You understand the little nuances of the things he looked for in pitchers, the tell signs in their body, and the way he would pick up on what pitches they were throwing, and just the way he viewed the baseball and could see the seam spinning on a baseball. This is a talented dude that had an eye for eye for being able to tell what pitch was
Absolutely.
coming, and he would make mincemeat of it.
Yes, and I mean, I used to watch. I don't think I missed a Jeff Bagwell game back then.
Iconic batting stance.
Absolutely.
I can't tell you how many times coaches that when I was in Little League had to tell guys, "You're not doing that stance. Ain't no one of y'all hit like
how
bags."
Can you generate power with your legs spread out like that? But Bagwell could do it with the best of them.
It would just unload.
It was just
man.
all upper body and he
had
like
a
great
coil,
eye for the baseball.
You're
right.
Like
he was already low to the
just
ground.
Unload.
Already low to the ground. Very powerful. Very stocky built. And I love listening to him. I was surprised to hear him the other day on the call, and a dry sense of humor, man. But I mean, funny. Was conveying what he wanted to convey. He was conveying his message very well to the audience. I mean, could explain things to the T to really help you understand what you were watching. I mean, the guy showed why he is a Hall of Fame baseball player, like you said, and a tremendous baseball IQ. And I would like to hear Jeff Bagwell more often call those games for the Astros as a color analyst, because I think he was very fun to listen to. Again, a dry sense of humor, but a sense of humor nonetheless.
Oh, it's certainly a treat. And I think you're going to get more of it.
He was fun to listen to.
It's a long season, Greg, and you're going to get more of it. And it won't just – I think when we get into next year, it won't just be him filling in. I think it's going to become a more regular thing. As long as he wants
Jeff
it to be.
I
know
kind of figured that.
I don't know what Jeff wants. I don't know if Jeff wants to spend that much time, with the team or not.
Wants to be like a Clyde Drexler.
I tell you what, it sure sounds like he follows them a lot closer than just from a fan's perspective. Like, he follows them deep. He talks to these guys a lot. He knows what kind of training they're doing. Well, what type of exercises they're doing. I mean, he knows so much stuff. I was completely surprised with how in tune with the Astros he is. Because sometimes you'll get guys, former players of certain teams come in and they'll get these jobs with the hometown broadcast. And you can tell that the preparation and all that just isn't there. The familiarity, they know guys. They watch the games here and there. They've moved on. But, they've moved on, but you can still see that Jeff is, neck deep in it. He's invested in this team, and he knows what these guys are going through. And he's got to be there a whole lot more than I thought he was. So, kudos to Jeff for doing a great job, and I'm excited to hear more of him. And if AT&T Sportsnet is listening, get that guy in the booth.
I know. Hey, I totally agree with that. And maybe one day – after basketball season, which is probably about a few weeks left in the season, maybe I'll get Big J.R. Richard back in here and give you a chance to meet an Astros legend that's before your time, but would have been a surefire Hall of Fame if it wasn't for a stroke that he suffered. He was on the show back when I first started, and I said this before over the past month or so about probably getting him back in. I don't know how much but he's mended fences with the Astros. Now, they had a tumultuous relationship for years after that incident, but I think they've mended fences. So maybe he's been in tune in a depth of what the Astros are doing as well, and I know he's still a baseball fan. So I'd like to get his take on the Astros, and maybe we can go back and forth with him and shoot the breeze with him at some point coming up soon. Now, speaking of baseball.
Hold on. Happy birthday to you, says Daryl Lowe. Happy early birthday, cuz.
I appreciate it. Appreciate it. It's Thursday. Appreciate it, cuzzo. But speaking of the Washington Nationals.
Yeah, he don't want to talk about it. How are you going to be? You look pretty good for 67.
Hey, no, I don't care talk about my birthday. Hey, I've already said it a couple weeks ago. My birthday is July 1st. But, hey, it is what it is. It's just another day. I appreciate it, cuzzo. But, hey, and I'm looking forward to it, actually. I'm looking forward to it. And roll on through it and keep it pushing, keep it moving. Appreciate it, though.
How old are you going to be?
I'll be 51.
There you go.
I'll be 51 years young.
You heard it.
51 years young,
oldest
baby.
man doing sports, 151.
51 years. Hey, I may just do it to 151. Hey, I'm different like that. I may just do it to 151. Speaking of the Washington Nationals, Eddie, speaking of baseball, the Washington Nationals, they're playing. I was ready to come in here not too long ago and say, I think the Washington Nationals mailed it in. They mailed it in once they won that World Series. Now it's deja vu all over again. The year they won the World Series, they started out, 19 and 30 something, 19 and 31 or something like that. They started out the year this year like that. Now they've won 13 of 17. Schwarber is mashing right now. Schwarber is this guy right here Kyle Schwarber. You remember Kyle Schwarber,
Absolutely.
huh? Over the last 17 games, 354 average, 411 on base percentage, 15 home runs, 23 RBIs, and Juan Soto hasn't even gotten into his groove yet. And we know they have the veteran pitching to hold things down. So watch out for the Washington Nationals. Still don't know what the Yankees are doing right now. I don't know if Brett Boone needs to get on these guys more, if he's more like their brother or what, or if he's holding these guys accountable. They're inconsistent, and they're playing in a tough division to where they have to watch it because the Rays and the Red Sox will run away.
Hey, and what about, don't forget, how much their big names, in particular Garrett Cole, have struggled since MLB has cracked down on the spider tag. And they have, I don't know how
they just suspended a guy.
I don't know how they register it. They can get your spin rate, and there has been a noticeable decrease in his spin rate, and he has not been effective. He's been getting rocked lately.
Is it anything they can't get these days? I mean, they can get a stat on anything, man. Like I say, how many he's batting this when he picks his nose. He's batting this when he does this. But that's amazing. Now they did just suspend a guy, Eddie. What's this guy's name from the Hector Santiago from the Mariners, suspended 10 games for possessing a foreign substance in his glove this past Sunday. So MLB is serious about this. They're trying to level the playing field, and these pitchers, they better start practicing without this foreign substance. Like I said a few weeks ago, they better start practicing and getting used to not using a foreign substance. But Garrett Cole,
hey, it doesn't
have you
surprise
seen Garrett
me
Cole's interviews lately? He's just like he's lost for words.
They're bizarre. There's no shame in this game. He's openly lobbying for them to legalize this substance so that he can get back on top of his game.
Yeah.
And it's funny. It doesn't surprise me that the first player being suspended for this stuff is a player on a losing team like Seattle Mariners. If there's anybody who needs to be doing it, it's the teams that are getting their ass kicked right now. And Seattle's had a tough season.
Real talk, man. Real talk. Hey, so you want to talk some NFL?
Sure, I'm always down to talk some NFL.
Hey, you know what? I talked to my first cousin a couple of weeks ago, Eddie, and he's the wide receivers coach with the Los Angeles Chargers right now, and he raved about Justin Herbert. He raved about Justin Herbert and his ability to make every single throw. And, of course, they're under a new coaching regime. But he's a wide receivers coach, and he has a lot of input. He's a guy that coached in high school, coached Percy Harvin to a state championship, or two, if I'm not mistaken. But head coach there, has coached at Wisconsin, Maryland, has coached at West Virginia, has coached, most recently at Pittsburgh, and he's a wide receivers coach now. And he says that Justin Herbert, to go along with Mike. Now, you're talking about some great receivers that he's inheriting. Mike Williams on one side and Keenan Allen on the other side. Then you have your guy Eckler in the backfield.
Eckler
in the backfield. Austin Eckler. Now, of course, they don't have – he coached in college at Wisconsin. He coached a great running back at Wisconsin. And not Run Dane. But now they have Austin Eckler in the backfield, and I like what I'm seeing from Austin Eckler. So we shall see. But he says those guys, Mike Williams, and Keenan Allen, they can flat out go. To go along with
come
Herbert.
on. We've been watching Mike Williams going all the way back to the days at Clemson. Keenan Allen, where do you play? UCLA?
Mm-hmm.
These guys have been doing it ever since before the NFL. Keenan Allen, he's one of those guys that's just consistently, his stats, his catches, yards after the catch, touchdowns, consistently up in the top 10 every single year. With him, it's just all about health. We say this about some of the best players in the league. With him, it's just about staying healthy. Lately, he's found a way to miss a little bit of time but not have them extended periods of time like he usually does, and that's helped him out a lot. And then Justin Herbert, I mean, I
still wish they had Melvin Gordon to supplement Austin Eckler.
Yeah, that was a really good.
Now, my cousin coached him in Wisconsin, Melvin Gordon.
That was a really good 1-2 punch the two of them had when you get them together. I mentioned before with Austin Eckler, he's like a Danny Woodhead. He's like that type of back that they're tremendously talented. They're very dangerous whenever they get out in the open field. You can use them in the passing game. However, when you put too much of the workload on these guys, you get them running between the tackles too much. They get banged up, they get softened up, and they're not as effective doing what they do best. So you really need that battering ram type running back. You need that first and second down guy for a guy like Austin Eckler to be as effective or to be the most effective that he can be.
I agree. And one thing that the Chargers are going to do this year, they're going to ask Justin Herbert to make more reads at the line of scrimmage. They're going to put more on his plate. So I think he's going to take that leap. Now, of course, the Chargers, if you remember the Chargers back in the day with Eric Coryell, they had a passing attack. I don't know if it's going to be to that level, but with Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, and we may see, we definitely may see, but they had Dan Fouts. Of course, you had Wes Chandler, Charlie Joyner. You had John Jefferson at one point. Then you had Big Chuck Muncie in the backfield. So if they might try to get back to those days and have that potent offense to go along with the defense. Of course, you have Bosa coming back from that injury. And so they always have a good defense. And, of course, your free safety from Florida State.
Derwin James.
Derwin James is always hurt. He's always injured. But when he's playing, he's legit.
And hopefully that all this rehab and everything has only kept him fresh and not sort of ground him down like we see it do some young players when they suffer too many injuries early on in their career. Because coming into the league, this guy, the ceiling was about as high as it could be for Derwin James.
Derwin James is rangy, too.
He's a phenomenal player. They need him on that defense, and especially whenever you got the front half of the defense going through a scheme change like you've got going on in San Diego right now where they're going from a 4-3 to a 3-4. There's going to be some growing pains that front seven's going to go through. If you've got a solid, cohesive secondary, that can ease some of those pains along as the season gets along and as they finally learn how to play in this new defense. Don't forget Joey Bosa. He's going to play the will linebacker position now, and it's a whole new ball game for Bosa. They want him coming off the edge in that 3-4, and if you're going to do that, you're going to be out there standing up or every once in a while having your hand in the dirt.
Right.
It kind of reminds me.
He can go after the quarterback too.
Right. It kind of reminds me when the Texans went to a 3-4 with Wade Phillips. They're like, what are you going to do with Mario Williams? He's 295 pounds. He used to playing with his hand in the dirt. Well, they slimmed him down to about 270 and had him standing up. He had one of the best seasons that he ever had, with the Texans doing that. I think Bosa is certainly capable and can have the same kind of season.
Then you have Ingram.
Oh, yeah, they've definitely got this is the one defense, don't forget, this is the defense we saw shut down Lamar Jackson when nobody else could.
Right. Now, they played a multitude of safeties at linebacker. But you have to do what you have to do.
They're very talented. And then you look on the offensive side of the ball and you want to talk about Justin Herbert and what they want to do offensively with him. Pep Hamilton was their offensive coordinator last year.
Now you have Lombardi.
Yeah, he knew he had a young quarterback. What do you do with young quarterbacks? You make things simple for them. And he made things simple for Justin, and he had a lot of success. So we know he's capable of playing.
One of the best rookie years ever.
Right. Joe Lombardi wants to come in here. And don't get things twisted. We know where he comes from. We know who who he learned under, and Sean Payton. They're going to want to throw the football. They lost Hunter Henry at tight end. They bring in Jared Cook, a guy who
Jared Cook still have it. We shall see.
He showed to still have some big playability when he was with the Saints.
Right.
There were several games where he was catching big catches for big yardage late in the ball game, and I think he still has something left, and especially coming in a familiar offense, something that he's played in, he can show Herbert and say, hey, this is where Drew used to hit me up along the near hash, inside the numbers, right? Just hit me right here on the seam route. This is what our offense revolves around. We know that Sean Payton offense revolves around pushing the ball down the field. Well, when you have guys like Mike Williams that can go up and get the football, big guys at tight end like Jared Cook, those are the type of guys you need when you have that push the ball up the seams kind of offense.
Yeah,
so I think it'll be curious. It'll be
a lot of
interesting
West
to
Coast
see.
style too.
Absolutely. And the West Coast kind of revolves around dinking and dunking and dumping the ball off here, which they are going to do too, so you can keep the defense honest. But this year, mark my words, you're going to see them try to push that ball up the seam a lot more than they have in the past.
Oh, yeah, because you definitely want to utilize the talents especially the arm talent of a guy like Justin Herbert, and you want to utilize that arm strength as much as possible. And you want to have guys, even though Keenan Allen is not known as a legitimate deep threat, if they can really find a legitimate deep threat to really take the top off the defense, Keenan Allen is a guy that runs superb routes. So he's a guy that can run any route, even though he can go get it. But then you have a guy like Mike Williams, who's not a legitimate deep threat, but he can go get it as well. But if they find that guy that can really just take the top off of defense and open up some things, and for the tight end and running backs coming out of the backfield, I mean, the Chargers, again, my cousin Chris Beatty, he's in a great situation as the wide receivers coach with, with the Chargers. Speaking of West Coast offense, I was watching something.
And real quick, I didn't get a chance to ask you, how are they liking that new big left tackle, Rashawn Slater?
There it is. I mean, you have Rashawn Slater as well. And last year, that team, they ranked like 28th in efficiency as far as protecting their quarterback. And so that's definitely going to solidify that offensive line. Now you have a left tackle to protect your franchise quarterback for the next 10 to 15 years, hopefully. And so I think he's going to hit the ground running like a couple of those left tackles that was in the draft last year for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And so these guys at left tackle, you find if you make the right draft pick, you can get you a guy that can come in and make an immediate impact and protect your franchise quarterback and keep him upright. And so that's definitely what the Chargers are definitely planning to do. And so that's now my team in the AFC. And that's because of my cousin being on the coaching staff.
Right behind the Texans for Greg. It's Chargers, then Texans. That's Greg. Chargers, Texans right somewhere there. In there is the Cowboys.
But yeah. Well, no, the AFC, the whole league, you know, it's the Cowboys. Speaking of the Cowboys, now we were talking about the West Coast offense, Eddie, and I was watching something this past weekend. Bill Walsh, how great of a coach Bill Walsh was. Of course, he learned from the great Paul Brown. You get it, Cleveland Browns, Paul Brown. He's the one who actually owned that franchise, starting out, coached at Ohio State. A lot of people regard Paul Brown. He gets lost in the shuffle a lot when people talk about some of these greatest coaches, some of the greatest coaches of all time. But he's a guy who all the coaches, even Bill Belichick, said he was the best coach of all time. Of course, he's going to say that, but Belichick has 6 Super Bowl rings. But Paul Brown, I mean, pretty much the innovator of the forward pass.
Right.
I mean, and Paul Brown was a special coach. And of course, with the Cincinnati Bengals, Bill Walsh learned under Paul Brown. So they had a guy by the name of Greg Cook, who was a big-time quarterback prospect. His rookie year, who was going to go on to probably be one of the best quarterbacks ever, injured his shoulder his rookie year and was never the same. So the way the West Coast offense evolved, from what I'm understanding is, from watching what I watched this past weekend, was, of course, Paul Brown was very innovative in the passing game, and Bill Walsh, of course, was learning under him and brought his own things to the table as well, his own mind to the table and his creativity to the table as well, and they meshed in that regard. But Greg Cook got injured. Then they had to bring in a backup quarterback. And so instead of pushing the ball downfield, like we were just talking about with Justin Herbert and what he's probably going to do with the Chargers, well, definitely going to do with the Chargers this year, instead of pushing the ball downfield, they started doing a lot of dinking and dunking because they didn't want to abandon the passing game, obviously. They figured that was the best way to matriculate the ball downfield, boys. I mean, that damn Hank Stram back in the day with the Chiefs. But that was the best way to move the ball downfield was to pass the football. So
yeah, especially if you weren't the biggest up front, if you weren't the biggest and strongest or dominant up front, then
so
you could use it as a short passing game as your running game.
Right. Or they started dinking and dunking a lot.
It's the oldest trick in the
book.
book.
When he went to the 49ers before, so what happened was, I hate to say this about Paul Brown, but Paul Brown, when Bill Walsh actually was looking for a head coaching job after he left Cincinnati, and he interviewed for a few head coaching jobs, come to find out, Paul Brown called some of those teams and said, "Don't hire," and broke Bill Walsh's heart because he didn't think they were like that. He looked up to Paul Brown, but Paul Brown was telling teams that he was too emotional and he, and he probably wouldn't be able to handle the ups and downs and things like that, and which Bill Walsh admittedly was like that. I mean, he retired pretty much a couple of times or thought about retiring.
You know why Paul Brown was doing that. It wasn't because he was a bad coach. It's because he wanted to keep him.
Well, he had already, if I'm not mistaken, Paul Brown had already retired. And Bill Walsh, he was looking for somewhere else to go other than stand right there. So Paul Brown, for some reason or another, pretty much just flipped the script on him and was like, no, don't hire that guy.
Well, I'm trying to remember my history because, this is before my time. But I know there was an opportunity that Walsh was thinking he was going to get the job. And didn't they give it to Weish?
They didn't give it to Weish.
It was the guy before Weish, right?
Yeah. It was the big, but he did think he was going to get the job. And he didn't get the job. And in his other interviews, that's what happened. He got blackballed by your guy, Paul Brown.
But
what happened was it ended up working out. That's what I was getting to. It ended up working out to where he went to the 49ers, and you know what happened in that 81 championship game against my Cowboys. But they did a lot of dink and dunk, yada, 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 bam, bam, bam. But they were talking about, Dwight Clark and those guys were just talking about how special he was as a coach and he was as an offensive mind. And he could tell you when drawing up a play that when you catch this pass, there's not going to be no one around you when you catch this pass. And every time they caught the ball on that play that he was speaking of, nobody was around. So, of course, they started out year or two, wasn't that good. He was trying to establish himself, establish the culture or whatever. Of course, they drafted Joe Montana, and the rest is history, man. 81, and I'll never forget this, Eddie. I'll never forget this. In 1981, I remember the Dallas Cowboys. This when San Francisco finally hit the scene. When I realized they had hit the scene, the Cowboys had lost like 45 to 14. And I remember saying to myself, they lost to the 49ers, 45 to 14. But that same year is when the 49ers won their first Super Bowl. And Bill Walsh, of course, the catch in the end zone with Dwight Clark against the Cowboys in that NFC Championship game. And nobody think the Cowboys were going to lose that game.
Was he throwing it away?
Huh?
Was he throwing that ball away?
He says he wasn't. He said that's a play that they had worked on and it was drawn up like that. And if you watch the clip, Bill Walsh is actually telling him before the play, look for Dwight coming across and, throw it up to where only Dwight can get it. And Everson Wall thought the ball was being thrown away, the cornerback for the Cowboys. And I thought the ball was being thrown away when it happened in real time because when I remember watching it in real time, that game broke my heart right there.
That was just the throw where only he can get it. He was either going to go out of bounds or
I thought he was
going to
get sacked. I thought he was going to get sacked, man. When I saw the pass rush get into him, I was like, and it was 3rd and 3. I was like, they're about to sack him. And bam, the catch. And that's what started that dynasty right there. But if you really want to think about it, and I know Darryl is loving this because the Cowboys had beaten the 49ers in dramatic fashion 70, 71, and 72. And so the 49ers just could not get past the Dallas Cowboys. That season they did. And everyone thought when the Cowboys had lost that game 45 to 14 earlier in the season, the Cowboys came in talking all that trash, going into that championship game, talking about how we worked the Cowboys that game and we're going to show them who we really are and yada, yada, yada. And so it was some trash talk going back and forth, and the 49ers beat them 28 to 27. And that catch started that dynasty. But I'm going to tell you what really started that dynasty. They need to be thanking Eric Wright for stopping Drew Pearson because the Cowboys got the ball back with 57 seconds left. And I'll never forget this. Danny White threw a pass to Drew Pearson, and Drew Pearson looked like he was about to break away and go for the touchdown. And it was under a minute left. And Eric Wright, which is now called a clothesline, and Eric Wright grabbed him by the horse collar. And Eric Wright grabbed him by the jersey, a horse collar, and pulled him down. And so if it wasn't for that, the 49ers would not have started that dynasty and would not have went on. That's the only Super Bowl that I can remember that I didn't want to watch, that I didn't watch because I was mad at the Cowboys.
Oh, bitter-ass Greg, man.
Hey, man, no, you know what? I cried that game, bro. My dad come down the stairs. My dad come down the stairs. He say, boy, you crying? I was like, man, I thought Harvey Martin had him in Too Tall Jones. Man, I was sick that game. Lost a bet. I lost some money that game. But
that's a good call though with Bill Walsh, and and you got to give a lot of credit to the one guy who shares the same name as me, Eddie DeBartolo Jr., making that hire, making that hire and wanting to turn around the franchise that the 49ers were, and then 5 Super Bowls later,
there it is.
Maybe if he doesn't get involved in some corrupt deals, some shady deals,
right?
Maybe he still holds on to the 49ers. I know that was kind of the beginning of the end whenever he got involved with that stuff back in 1998. And was fined by the NFL, suspended for a year, and then after that, things were never the same. But man, he did a good job building that dynasty into what it was, and it all started, like you mentioned, with the hiring of Bill Walsh.
Absolutely. And Joe Montana, it started at Joe Montana, one of the best quarterbacks ever at that time. Of course, when his career ended, he ended up being one of the best quarterbacks ever. And I still remember Joe Montana back in that game against the University of Houston in the Cotton Bowl, freezing cold, coming back in that game. So that's when Joe Montana, oh man, he was a great, great quarterback. But did you see, Eddie, and then I want to get your take on Odell Beckham. T.O. is at Deion Sanders' cornerback camp, and he is torching. Of course, they're kids. But T.O. looks like he can still play at 47 years old, the way he's out there running routes and doing what he's doing. I'm talking about still bullying guys at the line. Again, high school kids, but bullying guys at the line, coming in and out of breaks, running deep routes. It's like, bro, at 47, it's like, man, you're talking about some dedication.
This guy, the camp, or this is on campus?
This is Deion Sanders. No. This is his cornerback camp with high school kids. And they say T.O. is out there looking like T.O. from 15 years ago, bro. Just the way he's coming in and out of his breaks. Not too long ago, I think he ran like a 4.5 40 or something like that.
Well, T.O.'s been 32 for like 13 years now.
Hey, man, the guy's a workout machine, bro. The guy's a workout machine. Now, speaking of workout machine, what do you think Odell Beckham's impact will be on the Cleveland Browns, who I think is a dark horse to go to the Super Bowl this year, with Baker Mayfield continue to ascend and mature as a quarterback on and off the field? And I like what Stefanski is doing over there. And with that running game with Nick Chubb, of course, and offensive line, you have Jadeveon Clowney over there, of course, with Myles Garrett. They've made some great draft picks over the years. Odell has come back within 7 months, like your boy Adrian Peterson, who came back in 6 months from that ACL, and he looks as good as new, bro.
Well, if ultimately you're going to have success in the AFC, we all know what city you're going through, and it resides right along the border of Missouri and Kansas, and that's Kansas City. You're going to have to go through Mahomes, and if they're going to get through him, then Baker Mayfield's going to have to elevate his game, and to do that, he's going to have a 100% healthy and bought-in Odell Beckham Jr. Because what it really does, they've got young receivers, Rashad Higgins. They've got a good young tight end, Austin Hooper, Jarvis Landry, Steady Eddie, one of the best possession wide receivers in the game.
He is.
And he still can give you that extra burst every now and again. He'll surprise you. Some of the guys he'll run away from time to time. But he's not a burner. He's not a guy that's going to give you these big, huge chunk plays that Odell Beckham has been known for, producing his entire career, going all the way back to his days with the Giants. Is he 100% healthy? Sure the hell looks like it. They got to have him.
Right.
If you look at what they've paid,
you have to give him the damn ball.
You look at what they're paying
like
this
Keisha
guy.
might say back in the day, give me the damn ball.
Right. What they're paying this guy and the production that they've gotten out of him, I don't think it matches up.
Right.
But that can change this season because Cleveland is on the cusp of turning a corner in their franchise history. We've seen them put together good seasons, competitive seasons. I'm not so sure we've seen them come all the way back around and do it again the very next season and be just as good, go up against the playoffs against opponent that they're underdogs against, like they did against the Ravens, and go and steal that game. If they do that again this year, then they're on their road. They are on the road to being a new age in Cleveland Browns football, which almost the entire time I've been alive, we have not had.
Right.
When's the last time they had a winning quarterback? What, Bernie Kosar before Mayfield, Testaverde for a little bit. When was it? This is a big season for them. And I like that you mentioned the running game because to me they have the best running game in the entire NFL, and that's going to be their bread and butter.
Right.
And you got to stick to Chubb, stick to Hunt, because when those guys are cooking, I don't think that there's a team that can slow them down. I mean, especially whenever you have the weapons
And then you can
that
work
they
the play
have on
action,
the outside.
play
Yeah,
action off of that.
you look at what Tennessee is doing, adding Julio Jones, and with the development of A.J. Brown, you understand why they need those guys because they had such a dominant running game. That running game alone was good enough to get them to the brink of the Super Bowl. Had they had the guys they have now, in Julio and Brown, maybe we're talking about them actually playing in the Super Bowl.
Absolutely.
I feel like Cleveland's built the same way, except they've got a better defense.
Yeah, they do.
They've got better pass rushers, better run stoppers, better guys that say they're just better all around. If they can add that explosive passing game when they need it to go along with the running game that kind of beat you up to a pulp, they're going to be really really tough to stop. They're the heads-on favorites in the AFC North.
Nope.
I'm not riding on the Ravens bandwagon. Too much uncertainty with Big Ben and the Steelers. To me, the AFC North belongs to the Browns, and it's theirs. It's theirs for
and I
the
think
Ravens
they're the favorite
to take
as well.
from them.
I think they're the favorite as well. Now you have some defensive backs coming back. Let's see what Greedy Williams, a former first-round pick, let's see what he comes back and does. I mean, of course, you have Denzel Ward, who's been playing great from the Buckeyes, and he's been injured. Of course, now you have Jadeveon Clowney over there. Let's see if he can finally, now that you have Myles Garrett on the other side, of course he played with J.J. Watt with the Texans as well. But let's see if he can finally get in double-digit sacks. Let's see if they can turn him loose and he can really get to the quarterback, how healthy he really is. So that gives you that added punch on defense as well. And again, if you establish the running game like you're saying, that's only going to bode well for Baker Mayfield because that's going to open up things for him. And you have to, I don't subscribe to this notion that they're better without Odell Beckham Jr. Odell Beckham Jr. is a transcendent talent, and what you do, you find a way, you design plays for him, and you get him the football, and you build that chemistry with him along with these other players. But I think Odell will come in and get in where he fits in, and I don't think he's going to come in and demand that he gets more touches than anyone. I think at this point in Odell's career, Odell just wants to win, and I think that was the case. I think that was the case last year as well. He just unfortunately got injured, but I think he's going to come in with the right attitude, and he's going to be that added dimension, that added weapon for Baker Mayfield. Hey. And Baker has continued to mature on and off the field, so he's only going to get better as a quarterback.
Yeah, like I said before, he needs Odell to play good. Now, what I'm curious to see is what you mentioned right there. Has he reached that point in his career where he just wants to win and where winning is most important? I'm trying to think off the top of my head when we talk about guys. I mean, we could talk. We could say, James Harden. He reached that point in his career where he was no longer going to try to do it himself. Instead, he was going to go do what he had to do, change his role on a team to go try to win a championship. Odell Beckham Jr., we all know, needs to do the same thing. I actually kind of liken it to a guy you just mentioned not too long ago in Terrell Owens.
Right.
And how many times we talked about, has T.O. finally decided that he's going to put the team before himself, that winning is more important. And one thing you could never fault T.O. for was that his work ethic, work ethic was second to none. So he was always in shape.
But I'm not sure T.O. actually ever put the team first.
And that's the thing. Odell Beckham Jr., if he comes out of the season, it comes out at the start of the season and starts having a lot of success, is getting the ball a lot, then does he sort of lose sight of that hunger that he had for team success, and then all of a sudden get back to sort of being the Odell that he used to be?
You know what?
Which is more of a me first Odell, a guy who comes back to the huddle and instead of leaving the last play in the dust, telling the quarterback, "Hey man, you need to look my way. Hey, you need to do this." Kicking football nets, kicker nets.
Right. But you know what?
I think he's
Greg?
still. Is he past that yet?
I'm not going to say he's past that because he's still a competitor and he's still a wide receiver. So some wide receivers can be divas and they want the football. All the great wide receivers want the football. So I will say this: I think Odell is at a point in his career, especially coming back from an injury like he has, that ACL. I think he's going to feel blessed to be back and be back playing with a team that has a chance to win. I really do feel at this point in his career that his ultimate goal is to win a championship, and he feels that he can achieve that success with the team that he has around him. Now, granted, if he's rolling, of course he's going to want to put up his numbers, and he wants his legacy at the end of his career. He wants to have certain stats that's comparable with the great receivers before him. But I'm hoping that he won't outwardly show any frustration as long as they're winning. Now, if they're losing and he's not getting the football, you may see him throw a temper tantrum on the sideline every now and then, and can't expect him to totally not do that. Now, hopefully it's not to the degree, hopefully he doesn't do that, but hopefully, but I don't want him to lose his passion for the game, and hopefully he's at a point in his career where he knows certain things that he can't do. He picks and chooses his battles, and he knows that he's with a great team, and they're probably going to lean on the running game more times than not. So they're probably not going to need him to catch 110 passes. They're probably not going to be this super pass-happy offense. He just needs to get in where he fits in. But they're going to have to target him to really keep him happy. I just think that's going to have to be the case. But if they're winning, hopefully he can keep his temper tantrums in check. And if he does throw them behind the scenes. But even as of last year, he has started saying all the right things. And I think he's evolved to the point to where he wants that Super Bowl ring. So we shall see. Now, Pittsburgh, like you said, there's a lot of question marks about Pittsburgh. I want to see what Najee Harris is able to do in that backfield. Of course, they lost to Castro on the offensive line, so they're going to have to revamp and rebuild. Villanueva. So they're going to have to revamp that offensive line. But I believe in Mike Tomlin. Mike Tomlin is a coach. He's one of the best coaches of all time, in my opinion. And I think he's a coach that knows how to work with less, and he's going to bring the best out of those guys. And I think they're still going to be competitive, but I don't think they're the favorites right now. We're going to see how Ben's arm is. If it's going to be able to hold up over the long haul of a season, we shall see that. And, of course, last year, he did a lot of dinking and dunking, and they couldn't really stretch the defense. But you have Claypool at one wide receiver and Juju Smith-Schuster at another wide receiver.
Juju Smith-Schuster coming off a down year.
He was. I was just about to say that. Let's see if he can have a resurgence.
I feel like he was a part of the reason why they were, willing to let go of Antonio Brown or go and let him move on, despite all the distractions. If Juju Smith-Schuster isn't shown to be the player that he is, I think they kind of endure some more of that pain and struggle they were dealing with AB if they don't have Juju. But Juju sort of lightened the world on fire early on in his career, gave them the security to where they felt like they were comfortable moving on from Antonio Brown. And so far, that hasn't really paid off. Now, Claypool has sort of opened
he's their number one receiver.
Yeah, where that door has slammed shut on Juju Smith-Schuster, or seems to have slammed shut on him, a window has opened, and through it has come Chase Claypool. Chase Claypool is a fresh cold drink of water for an offense that desperately needed a playmaking wide receiver to show back up when Juju Smith-Schuster didn't answer the bell last year.
Well, you know what? Hopefully Juju can have that resurgence, and he's a guy that can catch the ball with short passes and make something happen. And you still get the ball to Juju, obviously. He's still a great wide receiver, a very good wide receiver. Claypool is a guy that he's the number one receiver that can make everything happen, take the ball, take the top off of a defense. He can work the intermediate routes, big and strong enough to break tackles and do what he has to do after the catch. So they have a couple of good wide receivers, actually a few good wide receivers. Now, Najee Harris, I think, now you have a guy a la Le'Veon Bell in his heyday. You have a guy that can come out of the backfield and give you something in the passing game as well. So if things break down with the receivers and they don't find themselves open, now you have a guy you can leak out of the backfield. You can dump the ball to him, and he can make magic happen. I love Najee Harris. You see what he did to my Buckeyes in that national championship game and how he just tore up the NCAA football just the whole last season, how he just dominated last season. And he evolved as a receiver out of the backfield, and you can even split him out and run him on pass routes. So, and again, with Mike Tomlin at the helm, I think the Steelers are always going to be competitive under Mike Tomlin. I just do not see them just completely falling off. And then the Big Ben still has that hunger. I think the Steelers will be okay, but they're not my favorite. The Ravens, again, you incorporate J.K. Dobbins even more so now, in my opinion, like I asked for last year, and they started doing toward the end of the season. But you really give Lamar Jackson that added weapon out of the backfield that he can get the ball to in the passing game, and you can hand the ball off to him, and he's a home run threat, just as Lamar Jackson is. They've gotten a couple more receivers in the mix. So of course they're going to utilize the tight end. Of course they're going to do that. So you do that, But what they have to do this year, though, with Lamar Jackson, you can't be solely dependent on the tight end position, Andrews and those guys, that often. I mean, of course you're going to use them, but you want to utilize Marquise Brown and you want to utilize your receivers as much as possible. Hopefully Lamar Jackson has worked on his game in the offseason, worked on his mechanics, keeps his posture right, throws the football with more accuracy outside the numbers. But more so than anything, hopefully they call the plays and give him the repetition and they allow him to evolve as a passer and they show him that they have confidence in him. And in turn, that can help him build confidence in himself if they actually go into games and actually throw the football to the wide receivers and don't be solely dependent on the tight ends.
Well, I think whenever they made the move to trade away Hayden Hurst, that was sort of the first step in that direction to sort of eliminate the crutch that Lamar Jackson has leaned on for the majority of the early part of his career. But Mark Andrews is still so good that how the hell can you not throw the ball to the guy when he's open?
Yeah, you have to use.
You do want to see them utilize their wide receivers more, and I think that's definitely to come because as I mentioned in the past, Greg Roman's not going to continue to stick around and run this offense if they're going to cap out.
If he doesn't open it up.
Yeah, if they're going to cap out and be outs in the division round or even in the AFC Championship, that's not going to be good enough for an organization and a franchise that is used to being good enough. When you have a roster good enough to win a Super Bowl, they're used to competing for that Super Bowl.
Right,
Usually whenever you have all the pieces in place, which it seems like every year Baltimore does, they're competing for a Super Bowl. The only thing that's holding them back is their quarterback's ability to sling the football around the yard when they need it most, and that's in the playoffs when you're going to face high-scoring teams.
Accuracy and some consistency.
Yeah, teams that
he has to get better in that regard.
Teams that can put some points on the board, and Lamar Jackson, he can do that with his legs. You know, he can do things with his arm, like you said, with the tight end. But until teams start to respect his arm on the outside the numbers, that's going to make things very difficult for them to live inside the numbers, which is their bread and butter, especially in the playoffs.
Right, and that's why I like what you said right there, because what teams have shown in the playoffs, once you get Baltimore down, they haven't been able to come back because they just didn't have the passing ability. And Lamar Jackson has a strong arm. He has a cannon for an arm. He just, again, hopefully, and I'm sure he is. He's a very hard worker, and I believe in Lamar Jackson. I believe he's going to get better as a quarterback. You know he's a dual threat. You know he can make it happen with his legs. But if he can just build that consistency and that confidence in throwing the football to those wide receivers, and they actually start calling more plays in that regard, and he has a comeback or two where he's actually made a comeback by actually doing that, by throwing the football and coming back like that, and then I think once they get to the playoffs, he will have that confidence to do so. But that remains to be seen. We shall see, obviously. Of course, we can break down some NFC talk next week if you want to. Anything about the Texans you want to say?
Real quick, just to add on the Ravens, don't forget, they add their big receiver out of Minnesota, Rashad Bateman, to help assist the transition of this offense from a run-heavy offense to an offense that now features a couple different threats at the wide receiver position.
Right.
Because everybody just focused in on the tight ends. If Marquise Brown, and don't let Marquise Brown get behind you, and he really can't hurt you, and that sort of is what kept their offense from getting into really high gear last year. Bateman's going to be.
Plus, he always has an ankle or a hamstring, too.
Yeah, Bateman's going to be a big help because whenever you've got Bateman on the outside and then you can move around Marquise Brown into the slot, back outside, I think that's going to really open.
And Bateman was a first rounder, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, first round.
Pick
number
from
27.
Minnesota. Okay, pick 27 from Minnesota, a guy who ran like a 4.4 at his pro day, 4.3, 4.4. Not a true speed demon, but a guy that can take the top off of a defense.
No, and he's got tremendous ball skills. He goes and gets the football
and he
very
makes the
well.
tough catches.
Runs
good routes.
Yeah, you watch him on his highlight tapes. He's always coming back to the football. He's beating defenders to the football.
A very reliable receiver.
Yeah, some of the things that he does, I know he's no Andre Johnson, but it reminds me of Andre because he has that knack for putting his body in between the football and the defender, which is something that Andre Johnson did so well. And it really makes some of the ultimate possession receivers that can go up and just put their body in between the football and the defender, shield the defender with your body, and create a window for you to catch the football. Bateman looks like he's going to be tremendous at that.
Hey, well, you know what? I hope so for Lamar Jackson's sake. And again, I really hope they open up that offense for him. And I hope I'm sure he's working on his game. I hope he succeeds. I mean, I like Lamar Jackson.
I mean,
like Lamar
they
Jackson.
invested that capital in wide receiver.
For that reason.
Here we are again. First, it's Brown, and
Right.
then now it's Bateman.
Right.
If you're investing that type of draft capital, it's got to be because you want to cash in on it.
Absolutely.
In the form of yards after
and
the
like
catch.
you said, if Greg Roman does not decide to open things up and at least see if they can do that, he may not be calling plays for too much longer. But of course, we can talk some NFC next week, of course. And anything going on in the basketball game right now? We're about to get out of here. Let's see. The Atlanta Hawks and the Milwaukee Bucks.
Atlanta up by 5, 19-14, with just under 3 minutes remaining in the first quarter. Okay,
hey, so let's see if they can hold on to that lead and they're able to stave off elimination as well. And if Trey, let's I'm about to go home and see what Trey is doing out there on that ankle. And it's been fun as always. You know that. Enjoy your 4th of July, my friend.
And in case you guys didn't notice, no, I don't have anything on the Texans right now. I'm watching them very closely.
Okay.
But there's just still so much uncertainty because of what's going on with Deshaun Watson. But
that's why I haven't even.
Here's one thing I'll tell you: there are some hungry veterans on that team. Keep a close eye on Mark Ingram. This is a guy that I think he wants to show that he's still got a lot of tread left on the tire, and that maybe Baltimore turned him away a little too soon. But keep an eye on him, and then I'm keeping an eye on the defense and how they're also similar to. Are opposite from what is going on in Los Angeles with the Chargers. They are transitioning from a 3-4 to a 4-3. And so we're going to keep an eye on some of your favorite players like Whitney Merciless, guys that have been playing outside linebacker now are forced to play with their hand in the dirt, play the defensive end position. And then you're also going to get a look at how the secondary, in particular Justin Reed, Lonnie Johnson, these safeties.
Not some of my favorite players, some of his favorite players.
Yeah, you're going to see how they perform in a cover 2 scheme that we've seen have success in this league year after year after year.
There it is. Hey, Eddie, always fun. Again, enjoy your 4th of July,
I'm going to be catching fish, man. I'm be in Rockport, Texas.
I know that's what you're going to be doing.
Yep.
I'll be eating barbecue. I'll be queuing and you'll be fishing. So we do what we do. That's what makes us who we are. Legends live and let live. The Sports Court.
Good night.